Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Top 10 Tips Every RapidMiner Studio User Should Know. I'm Haley Matisa with RapidMiner, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. I'm joined today by Jeff Kiwanis, our RapidMiner data scientist. Jeff will get started in just a few minutes, but first a few quick housekeeping items for those on the line. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to the on-demand version via email within 1 to 2 business days. You're free to share that link with colleagues who are not able to attend today's live session. Second, if you have any trouble with audio or video today, your best bet is to try logging out and logging back in, which should resolve the issue in most cases. Finally, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Please feel free to ask questions at any time via the questions panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll leave time at the end to get to everyone's questions. I'll now go ahead and pass it over to Jeff.
Hello, good morning everybody. I'm Jeff Kiwanis. I'm a data scientist and solutions consultant here at RapidMiner, and I'll be taking care of 10 tips every RapidMiner Studio user should know. I want to just cover briefly today's agenda. I'll just run through a brief introduction of what is RapidMiner, what it means to be doing data science in RapidMiner. And then we'll take a deep dive into the top 10 tips for RapidMiner Studio users, and then I'll take any questions that you guys have after I finish that. So just to give you our mission statement, data science behind every decision. The idea behind RapidMiner is that we are a #1 product. We are the #1 open source data science platform, and we have the #1 marketplace for data science experts. So this means you'll be getting help from communities of users, and there's tons of materials and options and examples that get generated by our community as an open source data science platform, as well as we have an extensive marketplace full of data science experts that can help you bring your project to task. The idea is our platform is a key innovation and competitive advantage that lies in the realm of data science. If you invest the right tools and the right skills, you'll be able to uncover new opportunities and change the way you interact with the business world. So let's get started with tips here. So we'll start, our first tip is to enhance productivity using the Results Overview tab. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull up Studio here. So this is Studio 7.3. So if you were to open Studio for the first time, you would get a very similar view to what I have on my screen, except for this process here. I've just pulled some sample data from RapidMiner itself. So this retrieved Titanic is actually in the samples folder. So if you're watching this or want to attempt some of these tips and tricks, the data that I'm going to be using is going to be built into the platform. And I've just done a few data prep steps, but none of this is particularly important at this very moment in time, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to my results view here. And there's quite a few things. Normally if I run a process, it will take me into the results view, and I can see what the operators that I've been using have accomplished. In this case, I've gone from raw data to a prepared data set for modeling. This data set in particular is the Titanic data set, and there are actually plenty of demos offered on our website as well as the community site that cover the Titanic demo in RapidMiner Studio, and it's a very common demo for data science. But the idea here is that I've got this results view as such, and then I can also dash over to my statistics view, and I have a bunch of information about my data set. But there's another layer to the results view, which is the results overview. So I can move between my current output results here and my result history. And in this results history, I'm able to see what jobs that I've run, and then maybe I want to save different iterations. So if I open up each of these, they're very similar options. So if I scroll down here to the first one that I ran, I can see what came out of here. If I want to open this, I can save the changes here, and I will just put this in my local repository. We'll say 10 tips. So it opens up the process that I had actually run. Now this was an earlier version of the process that we were working on, so now I can come in here and see what my operators were and see what those operators were doing. And if I had other results in here, I'd be able to store them or decide what I want to do with them. In this case, all I have are example sets. I don't have any models or anything in here. But I can go through and I can see what each of my data points are. I can see that I had age, passenger class, gender, family size, passenger fare. I get that there's no missing values. I can see that over here. And then if I put any comments on any of those attributes, I'd be able to read those comments here. So there's quite a bit I can get out of viewing previous runs of processes. Maybe I tweak stuff and want to check, compare results. I'd be able to pull up performance vectors from previously run models and stuff like that. So there's quite a bit you can do within the result history to drag up old runs of processes that you've already built. Now the results overview tab also has a lot of other options. So the first tab will give me my data view, so I can see what's my example set. I've got 1,308 examples with 2 special attributes and 6 regular attributes, and I can scroll through as such. The next view I have statistics, so there's quite a bit of things that happen in here. I've got data types as well as a missing value count. Here I've got treated data, so I've taken care of my missing values already. And then for each data type I get different statistics. So if I open up age, which is a numerical value, I'll get a min, max, average, and standard deviation. But my polynomial value, I get the least amount of values, the most amount of values, and then it just runs through the values. It changes depending on the data type that I'm loading into RapidMiner. The next step is to hit this open chart here. And this brings me to a chart view. Now there are 2 versions of the chart view. I have standard charts, which will allow me to just select different plot types, and it'll basically automatically plot and automatically fit for me. So I can just take a look at histograms so I can see what the distribution of each of my data points looks like. I can expand my bin size to maybe I want a very generalized bucket size, so on and so forth. So I see that there's a few expensive tickets, but for the most part people haven't paid a whole lot to board the Titanic, relatively. I don't know how this money compares from 1910 to now, but for the most part everyone falls within, the majority of my data falls within this bucket. So I can do a lot of data discovery through this avenue. So RapidMiner very much works on a crisp DM cycle, and this area, this data visualization is predominantly built for data discovery, and specifically that part of the crisp DM cycle. As I move down, I can open up advanced charts here, and I can now just build out charts as I go. I'm not actually going to try to build out anything in real time here, but the idea is that the functionality is there and available for you to take a deeper dive into your data before you actually start prepping it or even modeling it. You'd have the availability to take a deep dive and say, okay, what's happening with my data before I'm even trying to predict anything. And for just about everything, that's the results overview in a nutshell. There are quite a few different functionalities offered here.
Jeff, just one question that we have that came in. This person's asking, what makes an attribute special versus other attributes?
Okay, yeah. So if you've noticed, I have 2 special attributes. I have 2 colored attributes. They are my special attributes. In this case, RapidMiner has a role system. So if I jump back to my design process, this set role operator is what's generating my special attributes. In particular, the green is usually a label. It has to do, green in RapidMiner always has to do with modeling. So if you have a green output port or a green connector, it's usually generating a model or involved with modeling in some way. In our case, survived is our label, or rather our target variable from other nomenclature. So this is what RapidMiner knows to automatically predict. So that's why it's a special attribute. Our passenger name is set to an ID, which is blue, and the ID basically works as an ignore this attribute function. Maybe we join this back with a list or something like that. RapidMiner will know not to model on this name, which makes it a special attribute. For the most part, a lot of our operators will ignore any ID attributes that you have in your data.
Great, thanks. One more question here, and you might be covering this later on in the top 10 tips, but this person is asking, can you give an example using an advanced chart?
I mean, I can build it. I don't have an example built for this, but I mean, if I jump into advanced charts, I'd be able to, you know, maybe I have the availability of depivoting, but I'm not going to do any transformation. Maybe I would just want to track, let's see, can I chart axis style? See, I have a lot of options here. I want domain dimension. Why can't I edit here? The axis. Here we go. Let's take age, and I want to look at passenger fare. So now I can drag in my attributes here, and basically I wanted to see, based off of passenger fare, what's the age distribution for that set. And I'd be able to alter my dimensions here, so I can also color different dimensions as such and size them and shape them. So maybe I want to plot multiple things based off of passenger fare. So if I drop in I actually will probably, I want to drop in whether or not they survived, and I can do a colored. So here I can see what the age is based off of passenger fare, and the color denotes whether or not they survived. So maybe I'm trying to look for some pattern between passenger fare and whether or not they survived, because my first hypothesis is, you know, women and children we know survived, but also if you were really rich, you also survived. So maybe I want to plot this, and I can go through and extensively add more and more detail to my plot as such, just to get a further idea of what's actually happening with my data. All right, so that covers enhanced productivity using the results overview tab. Now we'll take a look at our second tip here, which is going to be save time by using pre-built building blocks. So if I jump back into Studio, I'm actually at a point where I want to generate a model here. And so I might not have any idea on how to do that, but I know I need to validate that model, and I know I'll need a decision tree, or at least some sort of classification model. Here's where I'll introduce building blocks. So building blocks are something that you can configure, but there are also building blocks that come pre-installed. What they are sets of operators that come pre-configured. So usually it's either data prep operators in a sub-process or an operator that has a sub-process associated with it, so you can go inside of that operator and place stuff in there. So in this case, we would want to generate a cross-validation. So let me grab that operator as such. That operator, much like the sub-process we have here, has a blue sub-process icon, which means I can go inside of it and place more operators. Well, here I have to generate a model on the left and then apply that model and generate a confusion matrix. I might be able to sling this pretty fast and get it set up, but RapidMiner comes with pre-built building blocks, which you can access by right-clicking, and you can say Insert Building Block. I have built my own sets, so I've got a couple in here, but the basics one are normal nominal cross-validation and numerical cross-validation come loaded in. And I think there's a free, there's a couple other ones in here as well. They're intertwined with some of the other data prep building blocks that I've built. For our case, if we place in the nominal cross-validation, it says a cross-validation evaluating a decision tree model, which is perfect because I wanted to run a decision tree. So now if I come inside of here, the decision tree is already hooked up. I've got all of the other operators associated with my testing data already pre-configured. And now I can go through and say in the training phase, the model is built on the current training data set, 90% of the data by default, 10 times. And then it tells me the model is created in the training step is applied to the current test set, 10%, and then performance is evaluated and set to the operator results. So these are some pretty handy tools. If you need to generate a model quickly, you can drop this in just by right-clicking into the Insert Building Block and grab the pre-built ones. And then some things you can do if the decision tree isn't the one that you want, you can easily just say, okay, let me replace this. We'll go right-click on it, replace operator. I'll drop down the modeling, predictive. Maybe I want to run a neural net, so I can switch this to a neural net as such. And then if I wanted to actually, if I'm going to use neural nets all the time, I can now make my own building block by just saying save building block as, and I can say cross-validation with a neural net. And I can add a description if I'd like and save it as such, and then I'd be able to call that building block whenever I need it, which would become pre-configured with the neural net instead of the decision tree. For our case, I actually need the decision tree, so I'm going to go back to the original one, like so, and actually output this. And I can go ahead and run it like such. And now I've generated a model from that decision tree that we put in there, which ends up being not too bad. So it splits on male and female, which is pretty obvious. And then for the most part, it's if you're male and you paid a lot of money for your ticket, then you survive. Otherwise, if you're in first or second class and you're female, it's most likely that you survived. And then third class, just a jumble of attributes if you were curious as to the result of our model. But that was just with the building block that comes with RapidMiner Studio. So not too bad. The model ended up performing pretty well, and all I had to do was right-click and place a building block on there to generate a model. Now if I jump back here, so that's tip 2. That's the Prebuilt building blocks, and I did cover how to build your own building block as well. So for tip 3, we'll stay on top of things using notes and folder organization. So I'll cover a couple other things in order to do that. I do see I have a question here about building blocks, how to share building blocks with the rest of the team. So you can actually package up your building blocks and just email them to a teammate, or if you're working with a RapidMiner server, you can share building blocks through RapidMiner server. I'll also mention there is a community portal for shared building blocks where I'm actually going to be putting up some content later today on a few building blocks that I'm sharing with the community. So if you go to community.rapidminer.com, there's a specific portal on there where you can access building blocks that people have built and made to share with the community. So to start covering using notes and folder organization, you notice that I'll start with the notes option. With the cross-validation, there were notes attached to the operator and then attached below. So these notes are accessed by this little sticky note button here. And if I don't have anything selected, it will just drop me a new note here. So I can say RapidMiner's top 10 tips are awesome. And now I can just leave this here, or I can highlight an area. So this is probably more useful if I do something. Oops, I misclicked there. And now I'm just creating chaos. So now I can do stuff like this is data import, and my data import operators are the said color. So I can say, okay, my data import's happening here. I do have my 10 tips that are awesome. And then maybe I can highlight some of my other options. So this is my data prep steps. And I can drag this in this area as well. And I can also add more notes as I go. And I can completely format these notes. So if I enter in here, I can say where I want this to line up. I can change my color, and I just have the option to delete. So I can organize as such, or I can just drag this onto my sub-process here, and now it tells me that these are my data prep steps. And if I have an operator selected, I can go ahead and delete this data import. I can just hit the note button, and it'll drop me a comment down there, and I have the same options. I can color code it as well. So they just work as a good bookkeeping option, and makes it available for anyone you're sharing this process with, whether you're sending them a process or you're collaborating via RapidMiner Studio. You have the availability of outlining what you're doing without actually having to sit down and talk to them. The next thing is folder construction. So this is probably more of a tip for best practices. So what I'll do is if you wanted to create a new repository, in the repository view up top, we can do create repository, and we just want a new local repository. We can hit next, and I can just say top 10 tips and hit finish. So this will just create a new repository entry for me. It should be under T. Now if I hit this arrow, it should open up my repository, and there's nothing in there. So what I can do is I can create subfolders. So a very common folder organization, at least that I use and that the team members I work with use, are to generate a data folder, as well as just a process folder. The folder part. And then I can generate a results folder. And so within here I can add extra subfolder constructions for specific projects, or particularly I can just store a process here, and usually we'll start, if you're prototyping processes, we start with a number, so that way it keeps them in order from which we've worked on them, and we'll just call this Titanic decision tree. And so now as I alter this process and keep going and adding, I can add new iterations of the process as we go. Again, it's mostly to just keep the RapidMiner user organized, and so that way everything can be accessed as such. And you can actually import any data that you're using and store it as RapidMiner objects into my data folder. So maybe I'm working with a database file, but maybe I just sample down that file, so that way I don't have to call the database and bring it into RapidMiner every time I want to run it. I can store it there. Maybe I have text files that I'm using to do some sort of stop words filtering for text processing, or I'm doing some sort of replace operation and using a dictionary for that. I can keep those text files stored in my data folder. My results folder can hold any of my models, any of my weight tables, word lists, anything that RapidMiner operators generate. I'll be able to store as objects in my results folder, and then open them if I need to view them or utilize them in RapidMiner processes. That's kind of why we break down the folders as such, so we can keep it organized. And then you can also add in more and more layers of sub-organization, but that's usually a best practice for folder construction. Okay, I will take a look at, I've got a question here for, can you make an example about packaging data and a process to transfer to another computer or user? I I can walk you through that actually. That's actually pretty easy. So if I wanted to package this up, what I can do is I can just say export process, and I can export it to a location. Maybe I want to drop this on my desktop or whatever. It'll save it as a RapidMiner process, and I can just email that process to somebody. Another option that you can do is actually navigate to your RapidMiner folder. So let me open up my folder here, and I will navigate off screen and then open up my RapidMiner folder from there. Usually it'll be found under your users. So if you were to go to your hard drive and then go to users, your name, and then there's a .rapidminer folder. So in my case, my drive users Jeff Kiwanis, and then there is a RapidMiner folder. Inside of that RapidMiner folder, there's a repository folder. And so this carries all of your repositories and the objects that are stored in them. So if you just navigate, I think we just stored into top 10 tips. And if I go to the process folder, you'll see two files. This is a properties file, and this is a .rmp. RMP stands for RapidMiner process. All you would have to do to send this process to a colleague is to actually just email this process. And then they can import it by the import process option by going file import process. Or what they can also do, another pretty handy trick, is to take the emailed attachment and drop it into a repository folder that they already have, and it will automatically import into RapidMiner Studio. Data files work similarly. I don't have any data stored in this folder, but if I run over to my basic, should have a local repository with a bunch of data in it. Data files are same thing. They can be found in here. You want to look for the 100 file or IOO file, and that is the actual data file. So you can just send that, and they can import it the same way. All right, I'm going to continue. I do have a few more questions I want to answer in here, but I'm actually going to save them to the end so I can cover all of my tips and then go over any other remaining questions that you guys have. If any questions come in that are pertinent to the tip that I'm working with, I'll cover them. If there are other tips that you're looking for, I can cover them at the end here. So if we take a look, number 4 is quickly access tutorials from within the design process. Right-click on an operator. So what I can do is if I didn't know how to particularly use one of these operators, like say for example I've dropped in this cross-validation, I have no idea what's going on, I can right-click and do show operator info. And so what this will do, this view in particular, will tell me everything I need to know about the cross-validation and whatever's in it. So it has or requires these options, or can utilize these options. And then now I've got input ports, so it tells me what it's looking for and what's coming out of it. And then I can take a look at the other options available. In my description, I actually have an extensive overview about what the operator does, but if I wanted to jump into a further tutorial process, there's this little blue jump to tutorial process. It'll drag me and it'll give me a description of the tutorial, and then I can jump straight to it. So now if I hit open, it's open to this process. I can double click inside, and the text that they gave me to read will follow along with what's happening here. I'm going to jump back to our Titanic decision tree, but all of the options for those tutorial processes are accessed all the same way. So if I check out this sub-process, I can go into description, and then it says using sub-processes to structure a process. And I can hit close, and that would bring me into another process that shows me how to use that operator. So the tutorials are made readily available through each operator themselves. So 5 is fast track navigation using camel case searching. So this is something I might have already been using. And so sometimes I'll type in here. And now, if I wanted cross-validation, I could just type out cross-validation. Something about the way I use and teach RapidMiner is I always teach that it's always good to be a time-efficient, lazy data scientist when it comes to RapidMiner. I like to do things, and I'll back up that claim by saying, I like to use the fewest amount of keystrokes and the fewest amount of clicks as possible. So for example, there are 2 ways to save, the smart way and the not-so-smart way. So the not-so-smart way is doing the file save as and all of that jazz, whereas earlier we did the shortcut smart way, which is just store process here, which works as a save as function straight into that folder. So that's an example of that fewest amount of clicks. Here it's the fewest amount of keystrokes. So instead of typing out cross-validation, if I just type capital C, capital V, or camel case, I'll grab anything that has capital C, capital V in it. Here, cross-validation happens to be the only operator that does, which is perfect because it's the one that I would have needed had I not used this building block. And it also works for stuff like decision tree. So if I type capital D, capital T, there's multiple options for decision trees in RapidMiner, so it gives me all of them, not just limited to the regular decision tree. And then I can also see that I get distance transformation, and then I've got a data transformation folder, so it'll open that folder for me even though the operators inside of it do not follow the camel case. So I can either quickly search folders or I can quickly search for the operators that I need. It saves time. It's just quicker. If you know what you're looking for, you can just quickly camel case search it. I know sometimes if people are watching me do RapidMiner and all of a sudden I'm typing really fast in camel case, they're like, wait, how'd you get to that operator? And so that's what that function is in the search bar for the operators. 6, now I can leverage the regular expression helper for greater flexibility. So there are a couple of expression generators. I'm actually going to cover 2 of them, one of which is the regular expression generator. So there are a few operators that will utilize regular expression. I know in particular the replace operator does. And there's a few options. There's quite a few other operators that will as well. So if I drop in a replace here, what I can do is say attribute filter type, I want to grab a regular expression. I don't know what that regular expression wants to be. I'm not a master of writing regular expression for RapidMiner. So what I'll do is I'll open up this little regular expression option, and now I can say, I've got item shortcuts here, but the advantage is I can hit this button here and it'll give me options for typing in my regular expression. So I can easily say, okay, I'm probably going to need any letter, and let's see, maybe followed by a non-word character. So I can drop that in as such. And so that'll give me a regular expression that does something, and it'll just say test. So maybe we want like word. So here it pulled out any letter with a combination of that, so I can add in T there, and I can continue testing this. So maybe I want to expand this or figure out how I want to set up this regular expression, but I also have the availability of selecting extra options here and pulling in more options. So here I've got any letter comboed with any non-letter character. So here T gets identified as test and the exclamation gets identified as test. And so now I can go ahead and keep debugging what I'm writing if I'm not a master at regular expression. So I can back out of here. I actually don't need this replace. I just wanted to show off the expression generator. The other expression generator that I show off quite a bit too is associated with generate attributes. So if I wanted to generate a new attribute, I can hit this edit list here. Now I give it an attribute name. I'll just call it test. And now I can go ahead and type out some function if I know it, or if I know the functions well enough. But if I don't, there's a calculator here that I can open up. And this will allow me to actually utilize both my data set as clickable functions. So if I need any of my attributes, I don't even have to type them. I can just click them as such, and it drops them in. Anything that's orange, note if I start typing other things, it's black. So here, the orange will always denote a attribute in my data set. But the other thing in here is there's tons of lists of different functions I have available as a user. Here, I could just grab like an if statement, right? So I've got if, and then it tells me it needs a condition if an attribute value, then an attribute value else. So I could say something like if, I think it's, survive equals yes. Give it a condition, test 1, and then I can just output test 2 if they did not survive. And so the cool part here is I've satisfied the conditions that the if statement is telling me to use by saying if survive equals yes, output. So it tells me that my expression is syntactically correct, and I can hit apply here and apply. And now I can add a breakpoint after to see if this actually does what I want it to do. And now I get a test 1, test 2 for the different class variables. And so I can also expand this further. So I can add more and more entries to my data set as such. But what's cool is there's tons of different functions available to you. So if you needed to do some sort of date transformations, there should be a date calculation option. Where you can just grab different dates and get the difference between the dates, or just get if you have a weeks, if you have a last transaction date, you can set it up so you have days, weeks, or hours, or minutes since last transaction, and you can utilize these functions to further transform your data more than just the operators. So there's plenty of availability in both the regular expression generator and the function expression generators. 7. The last couple of tips, I'm actually, 7 and 8 I'll couple together. They're fairly straightforward. So I've got this alt-click to delete connections and the shift-click move result nodes to drag ports. So I'll couple these together because they're fairly straightforward and really simple. So maybe I have a lot of connections that I have set up. I worked earlier, of course. Now it's going to give me a pain. So now that I have these set up like so, maybe I don't need to output some of the outputs that I'm sending into my result nodes. I can hover over them and it gives me an X. I can hover over the X, but if I quickly wanted to do it depending on where my mouse is, I can just alt-click and close out my connections as such. The other cool thing is I can actually organize my result outputs here. So if I hold Shift and then click on these result nodes, I can adjust them as such. Maybe I wanted to add another performance option coming out of here. But I wanted to join it with another output and send that output down here, so that way I'm not crowding up my results and I know which results are going to my result nodes. So these tips are just small functionalities that if you didn't know were there, you wouldn't know to use them. So if you ever wondered how you could space out your result nodes, it's Shift-click, and then if you wanted to quickly close out connections, you can Alt-click onto the connections and close them. 9 is going to be embedding R and Python scripts more efficiently. So just to cover that, we can we'll leave our awesome top 10 tips there. But maybe we wanted to compare our decision tree to an R Python generated decision tree. So I can go ahead and just grab a multiply operator. It's down below in the RapidMiner Wisdom of Crowds. So if you've not activated this yet, have never heard of it, it is an opt-in program for our users. So it tracks user metadata. It tracks what operators you place onto the canvas and what operators you've connected them to. And then from that data, it actually makes predictions for users who are utilizing wisdom of crowds to give a best suggestion of what the community is using at the time. So multiply was in my recommended operators bar, which is perfect because I was going to search for it anyway, and I was able to drag it right from there. The advantage for the experienced user is the lazy data scientist that I mentioned earlier. It's just fewer keystrokes and clicks that I need to do. And most of the time the operators that I'm looking for are down below. As well as the new user gets the experience of RapidMiner users that have been dedicated to RapidMiner for a long time and have really hammered out their design process. And now I can get suggestions based off of what operators I'm placing on if I don't really know what the next step is in RapidMiner. And so I can go ahead and click these and try them out and see if they are going to do what I need to do. For our next step, I'm going to grab the execute R and Python. They'll work in the same way, so I might just grab R here. And I can embed it as such. So maybe I want to compare my decision tree to a decision tree that I can build in R, if I can sling R well enough. But instead of just building this out in R, what I'll do instead is I'll just run my R script inside of RapidMiner. So now I can hook up my data as such, and I can hit edit text in here, and now I can say my data gets loaded in as this RapidMiner main function. In here I can now script away, and I can add in whatever packages I need to load in order to do my modeling, and any repositories that I need to utilize to enhance my data or anything like that. I have access of just embedding R inside of RapidMiner. And then using the same tips we used before, maybe I need to run multiple R scripts. And then maybe there's a Python package that I like using better that I can drop in here like such. So now I'm using R and Python in the same workflow, but now I need to know what each script is doing. Let me actually drag that. So now I can utilize our comments that we talked about earlier, and now I know maybe this generates decision tree, maybe this runs a separate validation, and then my Python's scripting is doing an interesting pivot package or something like that, and then I make a visualization. So you guys get the idea. I can build out, actually I'll delete that. So now I can parse up and tell my studio, well, tell the users what each of my scripts are doing. So now I don't have just like one big conglomerate of our script. And the other availability to that too is if one of the scripts fails, if there's some error, like you miss a period or something, this script might run, and then this script might fail, so you know only I have to look in here instead of having one long list. You have to figure out where it's scooping up. I do have a question here pertaining to R. Will the package be downloaded automatically from our environment? Yeah, so there is an installation setup between RapidMiner and R, and RapidMiner and Python. So once that installation happens in R, to establish the connection to RapidMiner, and then RapidMiner just installs the packages it needs, and basically it has its own instance of R that it runs, through R with the connection that you set up. So it has its own area where it's installing packages as such. The last tip here, R does not have to be opened up during this process, so RapidMiner runs the R script in the RapidMiner engine. So I'm going to clear up our final tip for today and then leave some time at the end here for questions from you guys. So our final tip for today covers tree to rules. So now that I've generated a decision tree in RapidMiner for my survivors, maybe I actually want to export the rules so I know what's happening. So there is a tree to rules operator that I could drag in like such. And then what I can do is I can hit Control-C and copy my validation. So if I come into here, I can send my training data in, and I can send my model out. And I can send this model out like such. I'll take a look at what my example set looks like. I'm actually going to kill this process and go ahead and run it. So now instead of my decision tree output, now I have the actual rule set. So now I can share these rules with maybe my business team or whatever team that I'm working with, so that way they can now be able to see which customers that they can target specifically. So for example, we say, if we can ignore the first two because I know they're small. This class is pretty large, 139 to 5. So we can say if sex is female, no siblings and spouses, no parents on board, and the passenger class is first, then predict survive. So that's a good indicator. You can actually improve this model's performance by omitting these family size attributes, but that's a completely another webinar around optimizing decision trees for the Titanic data set. But the idea is now I can tell that, okay, if you're female and you're in first class, you're most likely to survive. And then I can see that if you're female, if you're in second class and you're younger than 56, you're very likely to survive. And then it breaks down. This can get a little more accurate too, but it says like if you've paid a ridiculous amount of money for your ticket and you're male, then you've definitely survived. The number in the parentheses up here, they refer to the predictions. So survived is on the left, did not survive is on the right. So this tells me in this bin, it's predicted no. So 0 of them were predicted to survive, and 6 of them were predicted not to have survived. And then it tells us we had 1,050 out of 1,308 were correct of our training examples. And you can see here, there are people who paid like in like the higher end of our spectrum, but just not as crazy high as these people did. So they do get mispredicted here. And I do know from the Titanic, from trying to increase the performance of the Titanic, that a lot of these are actually children as well. So anyone under the age of 11 falls into this prediction bin as well. So because they didn't pay for their ticket, they didn't actually survive. But, that's the tree to rules. So it's an easy way to take a decision tree and get it into a set of rules that you can hand off to maybe your BI guys or your sales team or what have you to make a business decision on those users. So quickly, I just want to cover next steps. There are quite a few resources available to you as a RapidMiner user. So first, there's RapidMiner blog, where you can find blog posts from users and data scientists like myself and others here at RapidMiner at rapidminer.com/resources/blog. RapidMiner community, there are tons of posts from users, including people such as Ingo Mirswa, who's the founder of RapidMiner, and other data scientists from both the R&D realm and from the consulting side, or just users that like to answer other people's questions. Features list, if you go to rapidminer.com and then to our products, navigate to Studio, it'll give you a breakdown of everything that's included in Studio so far. and the most powerful tools available in RapidMiner Studio. Training videos, you can go to rapidminer.com/training/videos and get your hands on a bunch of videos that will walk you through generating your first, or bringing your first data set into RapidMiner to generating your first model, validating that model, and deploying that model in Studio. So there are plenty of resources to get started as a new RapidMiner user. And now what we'll do is Haley and I can go through the questions here and see which ones we can get an answer off for you guys here. So feel free, if you haven't had a question, go ahead and ask away, and we'll get to as many as we have time for.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Just as a reminder to those on the line, we will be sending a recording of today's presentation. A couple of you have asked via the questions panel. So yes, we'll send that within 1 to 2 business days. And like Jeff said, looks like we have a bunch of questions that came in during his presentation, but if you guys have any additional questions, feel free to ask those via the questions panel. And Jeff, I don't know if you've taken a look at the questions, but the one question here is, this person is asking, is there a way to export to charts?
So there's unfortunately no functionality for exporting charts. You can screenshot the charts, which is currently the only way, but I know this is something that's been brought to the attention of the development team.
Thanks. Another person is asking, can I directly email the whole local repository?
Yeah, if you want to package up the whole repository and send it over, you can. All they have to do is, again, drop it into their repositories folder under users, their name, .rapidminer. And then if they drop that repository in there, or they can just copy over the contents into their local repository, it'll automatically import into their Studio environment.
And then I think this might be a follow-up question to that, but will it be downloaded automatically from the R environment, and does R have to be open during this process?
I think I covered both of those. So that was for R scripting. So you don't actually have to have R open. The installation between R and RapidMiner allows RapidMiner to just run R inside of its environment.
Great. Another question here. What are some common tips for your text processing extension?
Okay, yeah, so I will show that off. So there's an extensions option up at the top of Studio, and you can navigate to the marketplace. It gives you updates and extensions. So I can update RapidMiner Studio from here. Or if I navigate to top downloads, I see there are a bunch of options for extra packages for RapidMiner, a lot of which on the top downloads list are official extensions that are supported by our development team. The most commonly used one is our text processing. It doesn't come pre-installed just to save installation space, but you can access it in there. So now if I do something like process documents from data, this in particular, send that out there. I would need some sort of data set coming into here, but it is statistical-based text processing, so it is not natural language processing, which means there's a little bit of configuration to be put into this operator. However, the power and capabilities far exceeds NLP in terms of how much you can actually accomplish. So because it's statistical-based text processing, it can handle any language. It just requires that you set it up. So some things that we can use here, for example, we'll need a tokenize operator. This actually selects the words for us. And so you have different tokenizing options. So non-letters is what I use if I'm feeling lazy. I can write regular expression or specify characters that I want in order to parse up words. So non-letters will work like this. If there's a space and then a period, it'll take all the characters that aren't a space or period in between that space and that period. Or if there are any other characters in between, it'll take any or it'll only take letter characters between two non-letter characters to explain that correctly. The next step, you can also do stuff like filter stop words, for example. There are pre-built dictionaries, so this one, that is the dictionary one. So this one is English, so this takes out English stop words. There's German, French, Czech, and Arabic. I know people produce other dictionary operators you can get your hands on through the community. Or if you wanted to just generate your own dictionary, it just requires you to make a text file, and you can click and drag that text file into RapidMiner Studio, actually, just from your desktop. Once that data file is in, you can attach it here and use it as your own stop words dictionary. So I have one that I set up when I do stuff with Twitter, so I'll use my text processing to search Twitter for certain hashtags, and then do some sort of data science or just clustering based around that, based around the words that people are using in their tweets. And I've got my own stop words list that takes out stuff like retweet or follow or all of those things that people use to get people to subscribe to their social media. So I do that to take out a lot of stop words and URLs that are added in as well. Some other options, you can also stem. There's plenty of options for frequent item sets, whether that's n-gram terms or actually building out frequent item sets in FP Grove and stuff like that. But those options are all available. Those are some of the commonly used transformation operators. I think transform cases is another good one. If I jump into here, I can drop in a transform cases, and then I'll just make everything lowercase, so that way stuff like capital THE and lowercase THE don't get pulled out as two separate words. So there are plenty of operators made available to you with this extension that make text processing available and easy for the new user.
Thanks, Jeff. Another question here, can I execute programs from RapidMiner?
Yeah, there are some other options. So you can run R and Python like we did, but if there's a program that you want to run, or maybe you're just old school and have some C++ code laying around that's doing something that you can't replicate in RapidMiner for some reason, what you can do is you can actually use an execute program and just call a .exe file. Maybe it's just a script or what have you. You can set the command up here. You can add a directory. And there's environment variable keys. But you can actually have a process run as such through this execute program option. And so it'll call that process, it'll run it, and then maybe you're placing that file somewhere, or the output gets hooked into here as such. But the idea is that you can actually run other programs and then just import the outputs into RapidMiner from there. So I can execute this process to run first, and then it looks for a file that this process generates, so on and so forth. So there's quite an extra availability if you play around with executing other programs. Maybe there are other Java-based programs which would easily work with RapidMiner because it is a Java. It does sit on Java. Or it can be any non-Java-based program as well.
Great. Another question here, can I establish a web service from RapidMiner?
Yes. So if you are a RapidMiner server user, so I actually have a web service set up. So let me actually log into my server here. And what I can do is once I'm logged in, I can then say browse, which should log me in. See if, there we go, connected to the Dortmund server. And I should be able to say log in, and this will bring me to the actual server portal. So this is a server that my studio is connected to, but I'm in Texas and the server's in Dortmund, so there's a little time there. But what I can do is I can go into my services tab, and I can quickly build out a new web service. But if I edit this one, which is one that I have access to because I've built it, All it requires you to do is build a process in RapidMiner that you want to establish as a web service and call it as such. So I give it a source. I can either type in the file path normally, or there's a folder option where I can select it from a menu. But once this is good and running, the web service itself is the RapidMiner process that you build in Studio. This just gives you an output format and ways to utilize this web service specifically. So I can grab, now I can test this web service to see if it's running. And of course my output's going to look funky, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Services and hit the cog, because it usually works when I do it this way. So I am getting an undefined error, but it is actually running. So ignore the top stuff. The bottom stuff here is what's important. So this is my actual output. All this is trying to do is predict whether an email is fraudulent or not. So this is a positive hit. So I can say, you know, I have secret market information for you, confidential. This happens to be a trade fraud example. So I can hit test, and this web service should rerun this sentence, which I'm saying is an input, so I'm mocking like a REST API or something like that. And now it says, okay, it hit on these words, which is positive for fraud. So it's comparing this to some model, and it's established as a web service, and I can access that web service and embed it into other programs, such as like ClickView, ClickSense. And then there's a new Tableau API two-way connection that's coming out as well, that's being worked on, where I'll be able to call RapidMiner web services right from Tableau. So I can send Tableau data, rerun a model, and then open up Tableau. And I can do the same thing in Click as well. And you can utilize these web services from other applications or applications that you set up yourself.
Thanks, Jeff. One question while you're on this topic. This person's asking, how do they create a web service which uses a post call instead of a get call?
Post call instead of a get call. So I want to, so I can send a list of parameters as the post body. So it would be, yeah, so it'd be, so this is set up through the RapidMiner Studio. So what's coming out of it, whatever is, so you set up what the process is looking for, and so that's what the web service, my web service is set up to look for something in the RapidMiner process itself. In order to send stuff out, so maybe if you wanted to do some, if your web service is data prep that gets sent to something else, that's just how you set up the RapidMiner process. So the RapidMiner process is the data prep, or it does the scoring of the model, and then the last operator you have is write to this database. So your web service, whenever anybody runs your web service, it's just appending those results into a database section. Most of what you take in or send out of a web service is built in RapidMiner Studio.
Great, thanks. So it looks like we're just about time. For those, if we weren't able to address your question on the line here, we'll make sure to follow up with you via email within the next few business days. So thanks again, Jeff, and thanks everyone for joining us for today's presentation, and we hope you have a great day.